It was another big week in the ANZ Championship last weekend as the West Coast Fever came crashing down to earth, while the Adelaide Thunderbirds and Queensland Firebirds firmed as genuine title contenders. But the big news story of the week was that of the Canterbury Tactics getting over the top of the Northern Mystics in a double overtime epic. As I say hello and welcome to Centre Pass, the official video podcast of the ANZ Championship. Dan Ryan here alongside former Australian skipper Kathryn Harby-Williams. And Kath, round 4, not as controversial as the previous round, but still plenty to talk about considering the sacking of Natalie Avellino as the assistant coach from the Southern Steel over the past couple of days.
Well, I think that's pretty controversial in itself when it comes to netball, actually, Dan, because I can't recall a sacking having occurred to a coach before. So, look, it's been an odd situation with the Steel. When they named co-coaches a couple of seasons ago, you thought that it was probably destined for disaster. If it was a successful formula, it'd be used all around the world, but it's not, and there's reasons for that. Coach needs autonomy, and to have two coaches is silly in my mind. So then what happened is they chose one coach, and I think Natalie Avellino's failing then was then to accept the role as assistant coach, because I think that would have been very difficult to do. And they haven't been very successful this season, and there have been some problems, and as a result, Nat Avellino has been sacked. I think she and Janine Southby have different philosophies, and when you're unsuccessful, you know, things rise to the surface and it makes it very, very difficult. But I think they're in for hiding anyway. They should never have selected co-coaches to start with.
That was the official word from Sue Clark, the CEO of Netball South, saying that the partnership was no longer tangible and that they both had different coaching philosophies and it was no longer working. So that is the case there at the Southern Steel. Well, it was a big round in round 4 of the competition. Here are all of the results from that round. Of course, we started off in Adelaide with the Adelaide Thunderbirds coming out firing from the first whistle, stopping the West Coast Fever in their tracks to claim a 26-goal win. The Central Pulse pulled back an 8-goal deficit to get over the line against the Southern Steel. The Queensland Firebirds overcame a slow first half to overrun the New South Wales Swifts 61-53 in Sydney. And in an absolute thriller, the Canterbury Tactics upset the Northern Mystics in double extra time to get their first win of the season. The Magic and Vixens both having the bye in round 4. Kath, as we take a look at the competition ladder as it stands at the moment, the Firebirds the only undefeated team on top of the table, but still very early days in the competition.
So early that I don't think you can make a judgment on the Firebirds at the moment. They're looking good, but they haven't played the Vixens, the Thunderbirds and the Magic, which are the other 3 sides in that top 4. So until they do that, I think the jury's out. The Pulse are interesting. They're hovering around the place. They just need to keep beating New Zealand sides, and they did that on the weekend, so that's positive for them. And if you look at the bottom of the table, the Mystics last year played finals. They haven't won a game. The last time they lost 4 in a row was in 2008 and they finished 7th, so it's going to be a long season for the Mystics girls.
Certainly will be, as we now turn our attention to round 5 of the competition. 4 games to come to you once again. This time we have the Southern Steel and the Queensland Firebirds with the bye. Kath, we're going to talk about our first game, the West Coast Fever against the New South Wales Swifts. They met in round 1. It was a comprehensive 14-goal win to the Swifts. This game for both teams, season-defining for many ways. If the Swifts drop this one, that's their 4th loss of the season. This, though, for the West Coast Fever at home is a game they must win to prove they can beat Australian teams.
Yeah, well, that's the interesting stat, isn't it? The Fever have the potential to upset the top New Zealand sides, but when it comes to Australian sides, they've won 6 out of 42 in the history of the competition. So it goes to show they really struggle with that one-on-one, hard-defining defence. So yes, they really need to win this one to show that they have taken a step up. Otherwise, you know, I'm not sure how much of an advancement they've made over last year.
The other big game we want to talk about is the Adelaide Thunderbirds hosting the Melbourne Vixens. These two have a fierce rivalry, we know. The Vixens have the upper hand over the Thunderbirds at the moment. Their last 5 encounters going the way of the Melbourne side. They met, of course, too, Kath, in round 2, and it was a 14-goal win for the Vixens. The Thunderbirds, though, bring in great form after what they did against the Fever. The Vixens coming off the bye.
Yep, look, if ever the Thunderbirds can beat the Vixens, it's this weekend. You know, their game is moulded around strong defence, and they couldn't have played any better against the Fever than they did last week. So, you know, the Vixens are coming in, they're not so match hardened, but, you know, look at the scoreline over the last 3 games that they've played each other. 44 is the highest number of goals that the Thunderbirds have put up. Prior to that, it was 34 and 40. So what it tells you is they really struggle to score. So Borrego and Bell need to be on their game, but I think it's going to be one in the mid-court for the Thunderbirds. If they can get on top like they did against the Fever and stop that supply, then they're a chance. But, you know, the Vixens have got so much depth. You look at Caldwell and Howarth, who will probably start, and then you've got McMahon on the bench, so, you know, it's not easy.
This game will probably come down to which team has 7 performers, no passengers on the court. How tough is it for a team like the Thunderbirds to come up against the Vixens, knowing that history tells you that the Vixens normally get over the line. Their last 5 wins, they've got it. That mental battle to get over that block, how tough is it for a team?
Yeah, it depends on the stage of the season, and because the Thunderbirds have been building and they put in their best performance on the weekend, I think it's not so difficult for them now. If they'd played them a couple of weeks ago, or even when they did play them early in the round, they would have struggled because they weren't hitting peak form. But now they're on top of their game, I don't think it will be as difficult. And it's sort of something that you shut and put into the back of your mind. It's only when the game's sort of, getting away from you, and if the Vixens get on the roll, you start to think, not again. So that's where the danger will come from.
Looking forward to that one. The Thunderbirds hosting the Melbourne Vixens. Another big game will be the Northern Mystics hosting the Central Pulse. The Mystics, Kath, no doubt would be shattered to their loss to the Canterbury Tactics. For them, it will go either two ways. They'll come out firing, or they'll be an absolute train wreck again. The Pulse, as you mentioned before, sitting on the cusp of the top 4. A win could see them jump in there. Yeah,
you look at the form of both sides, Dan, and you've got to give this one to the Pulse. The Mystics, before last weekend's game, were letting through an average of 71 goals. So their defence is shot, and that's because they lost Harrison and Charlotte Kite. And yes, we keep talking about it, but they would have been 2 starting defenders in their side. So you can't replace that sort of stuff. So I think Ruth Aitken will be having a headache there. The Pulse are getting better. Wilkins, Leota and Thwaites are combining well, but the benefit for the Pulse is Jolene Henry hit the court last week. Was told just before the game that she might be needed, and she was. She didn't have a uniform. She had to wear Donna Wilkins. She didn't have her netball shoes. She wore runners. She always wears ankle braces. She didn't have them at hand and still played pretty well. So things can obviously only get better for Henry and the team.
Having Henry's presence there made a big difference, didn't it? She wasn't in her outstanding best form that we've seen her in previous years. She will get better as it goes, but simply having her on the court and transitioning on the ball from the defence to attack made a huge difference.
Yeah, that, and also just having her there, Dan. Yes, she might not be in peak condition, but she's a wise head. She's a real competitor. She hates to lose, and that rubs off on the players around them. So, they've got a real hard edge to them this year with Donna Wilkins and Leota and now Henry. So, I expect them to win this one, and they have to if they want to play finals netball this year.
Final game of the round will be on Monday night. The Waikato Bay of Plenty Magic taking on the Canterbury Tactics. The Magic, as we know, coming off the bye. The Tactics, a very memorable win against the Mystics. This will be an interesting game for the Magic, as I said, coming off the bye, but also their previous performance against the Fever was forgettable from their part, but also a controversial game too. So a big one to bounce back from.
Yeah, it is, but because they've got experienced players, Dan, I think they'll be okay. So you look at Van Dyke, 15 from 19 against the Fever. That's what she shoots in a quarter usually. So I expect her to have an absolute blinder. The strength of the Tactics is their shooting circle. Jo Harton was the best player last week, put up 63 goals in that double extra time game. But she's coming up against De Bruyn and Kopua, and they didn't play very well in their last game against the Fever either, and they have a lot of pride and they're so experienced that I expect them to come out and play a lot better. So I think they'll negate the strength of the Tactics and have a big win.
Looking forward to that one. The Magic hosting the Canterbury Tactics. It's now time to do our tips. Kath, we both got 3 from 4 from last round. I'm going to go first so I don't get accused of copying your tips for this week.
Dan.
Well, if you're a smart girl, you probably will, Harbs. I am going to go with the West Coast Fever over the Swifts. The Adelaide Thunderbirds to beat the Melbourne Vixens by a couple of goals. That'll be a tight one. The Pulse too good for the Northern Mystics, and the Magic to get over the line against the Canterbury Tactics. Harbs, who are you going for?
Ditto. The one that there are 2 hard games to pick. That is the Thunderbirds and the Vixens, and I think the Thunderbirds will just get there. The Fever and the Swifts was the other difficult one. I'm just giving it to them because they put up a lot more attempts and they'll keep supplying balls. So I think that'll be a tight one too. But
you're playing it safe, aren't you?
Because I know if I pick the same as you, I'll still be one ahead.
Exactly. Very smart work there from Kathryn Harby-Williams. Well, that's all we have time for this week's edition of Centre Pass. Thank you very much for joining us. Harbs, thanks for all your insights and good luck with your tips this week. Make sure you check out the ANZ Champs website for all of the broadcast details for round 5 of the competition. Enjoy the netball. We'll catch you next week.